Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Office Hours. Today's going to be a little bit different. Today, I'm going to teach you how to talk like a consultant. How weird is that? I hear myself giving clients the same lines over and over again, and this stream actually comes right after a consulting client call where I found myself using a couple of those lines. So I wanted to share the lines that I use the most often with you. I've actually blogged about these years and years ago, but I figured now's a good time to revisit them and kind of talk through them live. In the show notes underneath, I'll have a link to the blog posts that talk about each of these lines in more detail. So the number one line that I use all the time with clients when I'm working with clients, people will often call me and say, hey Brent, well they don't call me directly, they set up calls. They call me and they say, hey Brent, we're trying to dive into this exact technical thing. Hey Brent, we want to know exactly what this number means. Hey Brent, I have all kinds of metrics to back up this thing. What does it actually mean? And my classic response right away is, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? If you've attended office hours in the past, you've heard me use that line countless times. Comes up all the time. What's the problem that we're trying to solve? And what that means is that people are zoomed in too close. They're like, hey, I'm trying to look really closely at this microscopic number. And I want them to take a few steps back and go, all right, wait a minute, what brought us here? Why are we looking at turning that specific dial? What is it that makes us think that this is the source of our problems? Because very often when we're deeply technical, we rat hole on something and we made the wrong assumptions along the way. We thought that our troubleshooting process was good. We think we're in the right spot in order to solve the problem, when in reality, we missed one of many things along the way that would have clued us in to there being a slightly different problem. The other thing is that sometimes that technical people are deeply obsessed on about something that doesn't actually matter to the business. That the business users are complaining about something, whether it's slow reports, a slow website, whatever. And the IT folks are focused on something in a monitoring tool that is flashing a red light, but isn't necessarily anything related to the technical problem at hand. Classic example of this is SQL Server index fragmentation. There are a lot of tools that will tell you that index fragmentation is really important, that you should be defragmenting your tables and rebuilding your indexes regularly, when in reality that often causes more problems than it solves, especially in the day and age of the cloud. All right, the next consulting line, this one's a little bit different. The next consulting line is about when someone is insisting, here's the step that we need to take. Here's the thing we need to do, and they're not listening to your advice. You want to give advice to steer the conversation in one way, but people just aren't hearing it. If they go, well, this is the thing that we need to do. We got to do this thing right here, especially in the example of the last one when I talk about what's a problem we're trying to solve. If they're banging on one specific thing and they refuse to leave focus away from it, my consulting line is, sounds like you've got it all under control. It sounds like you've got it all under control. It sounds like you know what the problem is. It sounds like you know the next step to take. I'll go ahead and step aside so that you can go knock that out. And then often when this happens, it forces people to go, wait, but I need you. Oh, what do you need me for? Because it sounds like you've already told me what the problem is. It sounds like you're really confident in the solution. I'm just delaying you. All I'm doing is slowing you down from getting that problem solved. Why don't you go ahead and take over and run with it? Sounds like you've got it all under control. And what that also does is it helps other people in the room step in. Sometimes I work with database administrators or developers who are absolutely dead set on, this is the approach that we have to take. And sometimes they've even tried it multiple times. Sometimes they've tried this solution. We've got to add more indexes, for example. They've tried this solution repeatedly, And I go, okay, well, sounds like you're on track to finish it up. Sounds like you got it all under control. Let me know how it goes. That gives the managers in the room, or end users, stakeholders, whatever, the opportunity to say, actually, it turns out we don't have it under control. This person thinks we've got it under control, but that's why we called you. It also gives the person who was really driving that hard, it gives the person the chance to say, but I don't have it under control. Now, I don't like using the sounds like you've got it all under control line because it does seem a little condescending. It can come off really negative to say, well, sounds like you're all good. I wish I had a more elegant way of saying that. And if you do have one, I'd love to hear it over in the comments. But I want to have a way to tell people, yes, well, if you know what you're doing, by all means, go do it. Don't let me stand in your way. I won't charge you for my time. Next consulting line, in no particular order. These are all over the place with different situations that I run into. Sometimes someone is so dead set on doing something, and sometimes that person's me. Sometimes I'm dead set on the one who's dead set on doing something. And we're getting ready to do something that's got some risk to it. Getting ready to do something that's a little bit dangerous. I like to ask, what happens if that doesn't work? And I ask myself that all the time. I do this when I'm writing findings for clients. If I'm going to give them a recommendation of, I want you to do this and then do this, what happens if what I recommend them doesn't solve the problem? Or what happens, especially if we're in an emergency situation, somebody's getting ready to make an urgent change to production and we don't have a way of testing it before we actually do it. We don't have a way to do reusable or repeatable load testing from development, for example. If somebody's getting ready to make a change, and especially if I think that change is going to be irreversible, the question is, what happens if that doesn't work? The first thing that I want to know is that I want to back out whatever the change was. And this ties into another consulting line. And so I'm going to talk about two at exactly the same time. Another consulting line is, what's the number that we're going to measure to know that our change worked? What's the metric that we're going to watch? We're going to put up some kind of dashboard up on the screen. And when we've done the right thing, I want to know that one number changes. Either it goes down or it goes up. I don't really care. But I want to form a hypothesis. If we're going to change muffler valve bearings per second from 1 to 50, I want to know what measurement is going to get better. Now, in a perfect world, it's something that we already have a monitoring history of. In a perfect world, it's something that's gathered by monitoring tools, so we can just have up on the dashboard, and as soon as we make this change, I want to see a graph go up or down. I don't want to measure by things like user complaints or user feel, because you might just run a query or click something in the application and things get randomly better or worse, because odds are things aren't 100% bad all the time. I want it to be something that's kind of system related that we can measure going up or down. So you see how now this plays into the consulting line of what happens if this doesn't work. Because we're as a group, we're getting ready to make a change. We're going to deploy a new version of a stored procedure, or we're going to change a configuration button, whatever. Then as we do it, we're going to watch that metric, and either it gets better or worse. And for longer term things, maybe it's not something that you touch and then immediately watch a metric. Maybe you trend it over 1, 3, 7 days. But as a group, if that number doesn't go the way that we expected, or if it stays flat, then that change was just adding background noise, and it may break other stuff. In IT, probably in a lot of industries, change equals risk. Change and risk are the same thing. When you make a change, you are introducing risk into a system. Maybe it's untested code, things we don't know very well. It's a configuration switch that we thought did one thing but actually does another. Since change equals risk, I want everyone in the group to agree that if the change that we make doesn't move the needle in the right direction, we're going to back that change out. We're going to throw it away. And I say the same thing with clients, because often it's not like I'm 100% certain of exactly what's going to solve the problem. I'm going to say, all right, one of the things we're going to try is we're going to try changing this switch. If that works, or put this index in or whatever. If this works, then we're going to roll forward with it. We may make additional changes. It may not be enough. Like it might be enough to get a temporary improvement or a small improvement in the metric that we're looking for. It may not be enough long term, but if it goes the wrong direction, we're going to back it out. All right, next consulting line. When I'm working with clients, the first thing that I do is a discovery call. The first thing we do is a totally free 30-minute session where I ask clients, I have a list of questions up on the screen, and I'm basically like, tell me why you're hiring me. What is it that makes you want to bring in a consultant right now in order to fix something? How many people are on the team? What have you tried? What does it sound like when the problem is happening? What all have you tried so far? Sometimes when I'm working with clients, there's someone on the call who wants to tell their life story. Well, I joined this company back in 1998. When we got started, it was on Java, and then we rewrote everything to be in C#. We started off with, we were based out of a warehouse in Des Moines, and there were 3 good friends of mine. Don't fight it. As a technical person, especially, those of us who are just used to pushing buttons and we get certain responses, we're used to just like saying, hey, cut to the chase. Tell me what's the error message that you're trying to troubleshoot. Well, hold on. I need to tell you about the back in the mainframe days. I used to fight that. I used to be like, well, for the love of God, our time is both valuable. I am billing by the hour here. Will you just cut to the chase and tell me what's going on? But over time, I've learned that there are some kinds of people who really feel like they need to be heard. They've been frustrated at their company for a while. It feels like no one's listening to them. They think they know what the answer is. And spoiler alert, as a consultant, often the people on the call actually do know what the problem is. They just haven't been able to communicate it clearly to management. So there are some kinds of people who just need to tell a story. And so when I figure out that there's one of those people on the call, I'll actually encourage it. I will say, all right, keep going, what else? Because that person, I just want to take the wind out of their sails. I want them to just, and then another thing, and my dad never really loved me, and I'm having problems at home, and I like to gamble. Just get it all out. Get it all out. Tell me everything that you feel like you need to tell me. Let's keep in mind that, the end of the call is at this time, but get everything out. Feel like you need to tell me whatever you need to tell me. And I actually take notes when I'm on client calls, and I literally do it on a keyboard. So they can't see the keyboard, but they can see my hands moving, which sounds kind of dirty. No, but they can see my hands moving. So as I'm typing, I'll be like, okay, keep going. What else? And I'll take notes even if I feel like I don't give a rip about what they're saying or why they're saying it. The consulting line is keep going, what else? So that it just encourages them to just dump everything out of their system. It's almost kind of like therapy. And then once they're past that therapy session, they'll feel like, oh, I finally found someone who listens to me. And sometimes there's valuable stuff inside there, but I gotta let them get all their feelings out first before we actually get to the point where we're gonna start solving problems. Keep going, what else? And that's important for those of us who are technical people who maybe, I don't really care that much about somebody's feelings. I just want to get to the technical part, but I gotta let them vent their feelings. Another consulting line, kind of related to that. When you have someone who wants to talk about everything, they go, my dad never really loved me, and there's an error up on my screen, and also, there's another line that I like to use as they're going through and dumping stuff is, let's put that in the parking lot. And when there's a term they use in consulting, parking lots are usually whiteboards, but you can also have a shared notepad. I do this with Google Docs with some of my clients when we're working on a complex project together, a multi-user Google Doc so that everybody can see what notes are being taken at the same time. I can share that, and then that way everyone on the team can also add notes. This is useful because it helps people understand what we're going to be focused on versus what's maybe not necessarily core to what the problem is. So I like to have a parking lot section in that Google Drive, or when I'm working in person, I actually have 2 whiteboards in my office. And of course, when I go to client offices, everybody's working in a room that has whiteboards. It's just the way the business works. And I'll literally write parking lot at the top of it. And then when someone wants to talk about something, hey, I'm having problems printing. I'm like, okay, got it. We're going to add that to the parking lot because it's not directly related to the problem that we're going to solve. I'm going to grab a whiteboard marker. I'm going to go walk over to the parking lot and I'm going to say, all right, Alex can't print. I'm like, is there anything else that's related to that we need to get out? And we'll come back to that at the end of this session, but that's not really why we're here in this session today. So I just want to track it in the parking lot, and then we can have a discussion afterwards or whatever else. Then that way, if the gig actually finishes early, if the thing that we're trying to solve we're able to knock out quickly, then we can go back and hit everything that's in the parking lot. I love parking lots because it encourages people during things like bio breaks. They'll take a marker and go write things in the parking lot themselves, and that keeps the meeting on track. Because they know, here's something that I've always wanted to ask Brent about how databases work. Let me just go make a note in here, and then that way they put their name and the thing that they want to ask, and we'll regroup and hit it afterwards. I do this so much that when I do in-person training sessions for corporate clients, one of the things that I do is I'll fly out to wherever your location is. If you've got like a dozen developers, everybody wants to learn stuff on databases at once. We'll pick like 6 hours a day of scheduled material, and then the last 1 to 2 hours a day is dedicated to the parking lot stuff, so we can go off topic and answer all kinds of things. Next consulting line, totally all over the place, not necessarily in order. I'd be a bad consultant if I didn't put that in writing. I'd be a bad consultant if I didn't put that in writing. Sometimes when you're working at shops, you will see things that will make your skin crawl. Passwords, credit card numbers stored in plain text, social security numbers, a complete lack of encryption, all kinds of things will just make you go, if this gets out, we're screwed. And so even if I wasn't hired to fix that particular problem, I don't do security work, for example, even if I wasn't hired to fix that particular problem, I'll say, hold on a second. Just so we're all on the same page, I would be a bad consultant if I didn't put in writing that we're storing social security numbers unencrypted in the database, and that is not okay. I'm going to put this in writing because I have to protect myself just as a consultant. I have to make sure that everyone knows I saw something horrifying and it's up to you to fix it. I'm not here to fix that thing, and it scares the, or maybe I am here to fix that thing, and it absolutely scares the bejesus out of me. Part of what this does is it helps defuse the blame. I can say, look, I'm not upset about this. I couldn't care less about it. If you want to store social security numbers unencrypted in the database, that's your call. But I would be a bad consultant. I'll get a bad reputation in my industry, and the people who write the checks will be furious if I don't at least mention that this happened. And in order to explain where that came from, I'm going to tell you a story about early on in my own consulting. Early on in my own consulting, I was brought in to fix a performance problem. And I saw something that was just horrifying security related. There was a sysadmin, a username and password on the server that had been the same for years. Everyone logged in as it. Everyone knew who it was. Had been the same for so long that employees had come and gone, and everybody who was a former employee knew about this username and password permission combination. And so I said, look, I'd be a bad consultant if I didn't at least mention this. I need to put it in the findings. It's not what I'm here to fix, but let me just write it in there and then we'll move on and we'll go on to the good stuff. I said, you're in real danger of getting hacked, and here are all the reasons why. So then we finish the engagement on Friday. I take off, everything's cool. And then on Monday, I get a panicked phone call. And the panicked phone calls from someone they're clearly driving in a convertible and is a person that I didn't know. And they said, this is the CEO of whatever the company name was. This is the CEO of the company. I want to know why I just paid you a whole lot of money last week. And this week, over the weekend, we got hacked and you didn't warn us about this. And I said, first off, I don't actually know that you're the CEO. I've never spoken to you before. I said, but since you have my cell phone number and you know that you paid me a large sum of money for database consulting last week, I'm going to gamble that that's true. I said, but do you have the findings handy? Do you have the written findings handy? No. I said, well, when you do, get a second, open them. The very first page talks about the security issue that I found and how it wasn't what you hired me for, but I would be a bad consultant if I didn't at least put it in writing that you had this very clear and present security danger. He said, got real quiet there, and I could hear his car just running in the convertible. He said, well, you're lucky. And I said, okay, that's one way to think of it. I prefer to think of myself as good, but okay. So, do you want to tell me why this is? And he goes, well, we got hacked over the weekend. Somebody had that username and password, and they got in through linked servers and did all kinds of stuff. It's like, we were going to sue whoever didn't warn us about this. And I was like, okay, great. Later, and I ended up working with them again and again for years, but that having that security buffer there helped a lot. But whenever you're a consultant, you want to make sure to kind of cover your trails and make sure that your rear end is covered. If you see something horrifying, say something, put it in writing. The next consulting line is kind of the opposite of that. When you're a consultant, you're going to see all kinds of things that are bad, but they're not really that bad. Things that make you go, you probably shouldn't be doing it that way. But they don't rise to the level of panic or concern, and they're not really what you're brought in for. When I'm doing that kind of technical work and I'm screen sharing with clients, we're looking at things or we're talking through code, I'll say, you should probably write this down, but I'm not going to write it down. You should write this down. I'm going to tell you what the problem is right here in case you haven't seen it before. But I'm not going to write it down. I'm not going to take pictures. I'm not going to include it in your findings because it's really not that bad and it's not the reason that you called me. But because you're diligent about IT, because you're passionate about it, because you care about the kind of stuff that you're doing, I bet you care. So we're just going to spend 30 seconds talking about what this is. You take a screenshot, you do anything you want with that information. We're going to keep right on trucking. The consulting line is, write this down because I'm not going to. This also makes people feel like you're on their side, because bad consultants will catch every piece of dirty language or dirty laundry. Well, actually, you didn't terminate this query with a semicolon. You should be ashamed. That's not a good practice. You don't capitalize your T-SQL correctly. You're not using good formatting. There's a lot of stuff that just doesn't really matter in terms of shipping applications. There are some things that are just like pure performance or security issues, but they're not that big of a deal. By saying, you should just take a note of this, just FYI, that helps establish that you're on the same team as the client. You're not trying to air every bit of dirty laundry, but you know that they'll want to learn those kinds of things. And then finally, the last consulting line. I don't use this often. Phoenix says, if the IDE lets me do it, it's not wrong. I actually agree with Phoenix there. Like as far as long as it compiles, I'm kind of okay with it. Because if somebody doesn't like the formatting, just buy a formatter. You know, if you're using Redgate SQL prompt, for example, it'll reformat stuff in a flash. If someone's using any kind of thing like Azure Data Studio or Visual Studio Code, there are all kinds of things you can download in that'll clean up your formatting to however you like. So I tell people, don't bother learning somebody else's format. Do whatever's comfortable. Phoenix says VS Code even has one built in for free. Do whatever makes you feel comfortable. And if someone doesn't like your code style, they can reformat it, whatever. Like tabs versus spaces. Who cares, really? Who has the time for that? I don't give a rip. And I've in the first responder kit, there's mixed both tab and spaces, and I don't really care. So the last one I'll mention is one that I don't use very often, but it helps with managers, especially when managers and tech people are in the same room. What I'll say is, do you want this to go 10% faster, 100% faster, or 1,000% faster? Another way to say it is, would you like 10% faster, double the speed, or 10x the speed? Just give me a rough idea of the order of magnitude that you'll be happy when you get across the finish line. Because sometimes as technical people, sometimes we get obsessed on, I need to wring every last bit of performance out of this. I need to get, say, 10% faster. And management is like, you know what, you're going down the wrong rabbit hole. We actually need it 10 times faster. This process is running in an hour. I don't really care if you get it down to 50 minutes or 40 minutes. That's not enough. This hour-long process, it needs to run every minute. We want it closer to real time, for example. Or sometimes managements go the opposite way. Management's like, all we really need is we need it to be, instead of running in 20 minutes, we're just trying to get it to run under, say, 5 minutes so it doesn't time out. Getting that 10%, double, or 1,000x, or 1,000%, 10x faster helps get everyone on the same page. It also helps everyone understand how much effort is going to be required. Because if you only need something to be 10% faster, I can probably get that done relatively quickly. But if you want something 10x faster, it's going to take me significantly more work. I'm going to have to roll up sleeves that I never wear. I'm going to have to roll up my sleeves and get several people involved. And it's the same thing with hardware too as well. If they want 10% faster, it's relatively easy to do that with cheap hardware changes. Whereas if they want 10x faster, that's going to be a whole lot more expensive. Gene says, Gene Tripp says, I can verify that line from you works. I made you gasp with my sequel, but it wasn't why we were there. Yeah, you should take this note away. You should write this down because I see that all the time there are people who I work with where the T-sequels are, also my standards, I would like to think that my standards are dramatically lower than other. It's funny, those of you who watch me do streaming or you watch me do training classes, I know from talking to a lot of clients, they expect my standards to be really, really high. They think I'm going to come in and be like, your T-SQL sucks, your indexes suck, here are all the reasons why. When in reality, it's like the opposite of that. I don't really care what your T-SQL looks like. I don't care what your index. As long as you're getting the business job done and as long as you're shipping a product that people are happy with, I'm cool. And if you think that I'm anal retentive about code quality, go take a tour through the SP Blitz code. I wrote most of that code. It's open source. It's heinous. It's hideous. It's ugly as all hell. There's so much that I could do in order to performance tune that. But you know what? Who cares? It works. It's open source. It's free. It gets the job done. People are usually pretty happy with that. All right. Phoenix says, I needed to go 10 times faster for the 5% performance price. And that helps me with speccing work for clients too. When we have the initial discovery call, I like to ask, I do a free 30-minute call for clients, and I like to ask, what does success look like for you? At the end of our first 2-day engagement, what are you going to say? Thank God Brent did X. We know that we hired the right person because Brent was able to what? Tell me what is. And we'll agree on everything, what the what is. And I'm not going to tell them I can or can't do it. First, I just want to hear from them. What does success look like to you? Which is also a good consulting line. What does success look like to you? So I know what finish line I need to achieve and what kind of timeline it's going to take me. All right, so there's a rundown of my more popular consulting lines. In the link below, I'll have a link to all of my complete consulting lines blog posts, and then I go into more details on all of them. Hope that y'all enjoyed it, and I will see y'all at the next office hours. Adios. Let's see here, and live. Whoopsie daisy.